Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. I was just tutoring a seventh grader, and he was relating to me a move that he had made on a girl, and I was thinking to myself how fortunate he is. Nowadays, everybody uses a screen and texting, and so we have time to think about it, right? So the girl that he liked would send a message, and he would sit on it for some time at least, right? It's not instantaneous that he has to open his mouth. When I was his age, we used to use landline telephones, if you can believe it. And I had an incident when I was in sixth grade, actually, that showed me how I get very ill prepared for things that I did not expect. Or sometimes I prepare too much for things that might happen, and something else happens that I didn't prepare for. What had happened was there was a girl in the class that I liked. And so one day I finally worked up the courage to look up her number in the phone book and to call her. This was in the days of landlines, and this was back when we had phone books, if you can believe it. I don't know how some of my viewers might react to that. So I looked up her number and I dialed the number. It turned out she had some kind of after school event. Her mom had picked up the phone, and I asked for her daughter, and she said, "Oh, she's at whatever event." And her mom had asked me who I was. I lost my nerve to introduce myself to her mom. And in the heat of the moment, I said, "I'm not going to tell you who I am." This obviously really upset her. I hung up the phone, and she called our school principal or maybe one of the teachers to complain about the situation. I think she might have did some kind of a trace on the phone or something. This was in the late 1990s. I don't know what kind of technology she had to figure out who I was. Or maybe she asked her daughter who would do this and figured it out. I don't know. But in any event, they complained to the teacher or the principal. Now, I wasn't trying to be malicious with her or her daughter. I lost my nerve. And unfortunately, losing my nerve is something that happens a lot, and it causes all sorts of trouble and embarrassment, not only for these kind of situations, but for workplace kind of situations as well. Yesterday, I had something I needed to say to my boss. I hadn't expected there to be. Uh, my boss was in the middle of a big conversation, and I had to wait. I didn't expect that. And as a result, I had all these things geared up to say to her, to my boss, but I had to wait like 7 minutes. And by the time she was done with her other conversation, I lost the flow of things. And the long story short, the conversation could have gone better. Let's just put it that way. I do that a lot. I really loved when we were working remotely because I didn't have to worry about those things. When the flow was right, it was right. The email went out, the text went out. I didn't lose my nerve. If the girl's mom had texted me, "Hey, who is this?" I would have sat down and wrote a two-page essay about myself and made her at ease about it, right? Or whatever it called for. I don't remember the kind of attitudes we had in the 1990s and how she and her mom were, right? But I would have had time and distance on my hands, is what I wanted to say. A lot of road rage situations would not happen if if I had time to think. If we drove 2 miles an hour on the road, oh my God, there's no way I would get involved. I don't get into walking rage after all, right? When I'm walking on the canal trails over here or anything like that, because I have time and distance to digest what's going on, right? I remember during the pandemic when there weren't too many cars on the road and people were driving a lot faster just because there weren't too many cars on the road. Some people even, I heard DUI rates went way up during that time. But you know what? I would see a car that would do something ridiculous. And by the time that I would even think about being enraged by them, the situation had passed. There weren't too many cars on the road and all that. I really love having time and distance and also having the flexibility of responding when I want to respond. Right, that's when I do my best. Face to face things. That's why Ever since COVID broke out, I heard there's been a lot of people who are upset when they fly on an airplane. 2 years ago, they didn't want to wear their mask and they would get into fights over that. Nowadays, people get upset over wanting to change seats. Part of the reason I haven't flown in all these years is that I can't deal with unexpected events like that, right? Fortunately, we don't have mask mandates anymore. But imagine if somebody sitting next to me doesn't want to wear a mask and the flight attendant is upset and I'm not prepared for that. It makes everything that I wanted to do that much harder to do, right? So I have dietary restrictions. I got to be careful on a plane, and so sometimes even the flight attendant gets upset at me for having dietary restrictions. So I just gently ask the flight, hey, just can you be a little bit more mindful around me, like just when you're serving the food? I have a lot of skin sensitivities. Just make sure to keep it neat. 90% of the time it goes well, but the other 10% of the time something untoward happens, right? The flight attendant believes that maybe I could have some of that stuff build up my tolerance. She wants to play doctor. That's usually how it turns out. The other times, people just think I'm exaggerating, or you get the idea, right? Or they wonder why I even would board an airplane if I were that sensitive, right? Sometimes that comes. Usually, flight attendants won't say that. Other passengers might, though. You get the idea, right? If this were by email, right? If I were emailing the airline to explain all of this information and they send a response like that, I tend to handle those a lot better than I would if it were face to face on the plane, which is why I think the whole return to the office mandate is bullshit.